go back through my presentation now. All right, so again, the purpose of this, again, is to just diagnose what's going on in the cryptography landscape, what's needed, what community resources are needed, and figure out what this interest group can do. Okay. So this whole thing has been facilitated by Concordium and the DevX Initiative, which I am a part of. I'm really grateful and thankful to Concordium for making all of this happen. You can find out more about them in DevX Initiative by just Googling. You can search for DevX Initiative Rust, and it will come up with the blog post, what it's about. And also you'll be able to find out more about what is being done through this initiative for the Rust ecosystem. Today, my co-hosts and co-facilitators will be Tony Arcieri and Diego Arana. Tony is well known in the space already, and Diego is from COBRA, the Concordium Blockchain Research Institute, and the University of Aarhus. So they're going to be working with me to make sure that there's good vibes and there's a good flow of conversation as we go through this. Just a point about expected behavior on the call. This call and RCIG follows the Berlin Code of Conduct. So we're going to just do some very basic, decent human being stuff. It's all here in the slides. So let's all just try and keep this as civil and as friendly and good vibes as possible. Here we have the etiquette and protocol of the event itself. If you want to speak, if you want to make a point, if you want to ask a question, if you want to respond to something that has been said, please switch on your video then and only then. This will indicate that you want to speak and you want to be heard. If your video isn't working, or if you don't have video on your laptop, then you can use the raise hand feature and keep that raise hand feature switched on. If you want to make follow-up points, if you want to respond to something that's being said. So we're going to try and keep this one at a time. And again, we're just going to do very simple stuff that we're all familiar with on a round table. And we want to try and keep the discourse and the conversation as civil and as organized as possible. So the agenda, we're going to start with the opening address, which I've just given. Then we're going to do some introductions and icebreakers, just get past all of that awkward bit. And then we'll go through some opening questions, some things that would be really interesting to discuss as a retrospective of the state of cryptography in Rust at the moment. So I'm going to ask Diego and Tony. Hello, if you want to unmute yourselves, and we will start with a little introduction from Diego and Tony about themselves and what they're doing with Rust cryptography at the moment, before going into some of what has been discussed about the state of the Rust cryptography ecosystem as a whole right now. Diego, do you want to start? Great. Okay, I've got everyone muted, so I'm gonna mute. Okay. So sorry, now you can unmute yourself, Diego.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm Diego Arana from Aarhus University. I work here for close to 3 years now. And my interest here is I'm a researcher in cryptographic engineering, which is traditionally done in C, right? So when we write papers, we write prototype code, proof of concept, reference code, whatever we do it in C. But there is some traction in the community to actually maybe evolve to something better while not losing um, way too much performance, because well, one of the objectives of crypto engineering, of course, is to develop high-speed implementations. So I'm also part of the Hex sub community, which is amazing, and there is especially an interest there um, to integrate trust in the ecosystem and in the research trends that go forward with deploying new crypto, producing code that's ready for production, or just writing papers about it too.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Diego. Tony, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tony Arsuri. I work for a company called Occlusion, where we do key management and blockchain applications. As far as like Rust open source goes, I'm one of the leads of the Rust Crypto project. The Rust Crypto project tries to do effectively like legacy nuts and bolts cryptography. So crypto that's implemented in things like FIPS or IETF standards. So like your basic symmetric crypto, hash functions, and some of the like legacy elliptic curves, such as the NIST curves and SecP 256K1. But yeah, I'm very excited that we're finally kicking off something like this. You know, I think the Rust ecosystem could definitely benefit from maybe something a little more like what you see in languages like Java and Go, where everything is like nicely interoperable and composable. So that's definitely where I'd like to get to. Like Diego, I've also participated in hacks where there have been some discussions of that stuff and like using Rust as a language for specing cryptography and standards. So I think that's all very exciting stuff. I'm glad to be here.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Diego and Tony. I think to avoid this being like super long, when you come up to speak, you can just say a hello about who you are and just give a very quick TLDR, because if we go around everyone and there's still people coming in, we're like 33 people at the moment, it's going to be a long icebreaker. One of the things I wanted to start with actually is both you, Tony, and Diego, you attended the workshop for hacks, right? That was recent. And it would be great to start off with like some learning, some insights from that. We can then go into a retrospective about Rust crypto in general. The workshop was like really exciting from the conversations I've had with you previously. So kind of give us a lowdown on what happened and how it happened, how it went down. If you want to start, Tony.
There we go. All right. Yeah, sure. So I think there's like some pretty common themes in hacks as far as like things people want out of Rust and don't have. One of these is higher assurances of things like constant time operation, and more specifically that when your code's going through like Rust optimizers and LLVMs optimizers, that it isn't going to insert branches in code that's otherwise been carefully written to avoid branches and lookup tables and that kind of thing. So there's some ongoing work with that. I know Google has an internal project to kind of add this as a backend feature to LLVM. And there has been some work out of hacks to try to create a Rust RFC that could potentially use those sort of types if they were added to LLVM itself. So I thought that in particular was interesting work. I might hand it off to Diego here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm not yet a big Rust developer. I'm trying to evolve myself as well, but I've worked with some projects like HexSpec. So I supervise a project where students integrated the BLS12 curve being used for snarks in HexSpec. And we want to use that to produce test vectors for perhaps even the standardization process that's going on. And also fiat Rust. So during Hex, I hang around quite a bit on the fiat crypto room, and we discussed also about performance, for example, of the fiat Rust code that's not up to speed. And then perhaps a minor but annoying issue is there is a kind of chicken and egg problem of migrating to Rust as the de facto language for at least crypto engineering research, that perhaps increases the likelihood of this research producing code that can be deployed in production. It doesn't look that much as like the product, typical research code that sucks, doesn't compile, right? Doesn't work correctly, or it's slow, not constant time, and so on. And one big issue, I think, is we always report numbers in C, and there is a gap between C and Rust still, at least from these experiments and the work I've done. So you don't have an incentive to write your implementations in Rust because it's going to look slower than all the other implementations out there. And then how can you really make your case in just a research paper? So making more of the community to use Rust actually decreases the attrition of someone new actually starting from Rust in the first place and skipping all the corrupt and bad practices in C programming that we have accumulated as a community for far too long.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Did anyone else attend the workshop and with any insights? I see that we have Tux Specific has his video on, or their video on. Would you like to share something?
Not in particular. I'm just here just to kind of participate. I will probably end up doing more Rust cryptography development in the future. So some work I previously did with a coworker of mine was the K256 library. So I'll probably still work on maintaining that, if not some future libraries in the future. I don't really know. I'm sorry, I joined late, so I missed. I'm not sure which workshop you're referring to. So,
no worries.
But yeah, I'm happy to be here and kind of hear where I can help out and what I can do in the future.
Great. No, amazing. Thank you. Deirdre has their hand up. So yes, it'll be great to hear from you.
I was also at Hacks. Hacks was awesome. One quick point on Tony mentioning some of the we would like to get like a secret keyword into either Rust or LLVM, and I think some of the Google folks were either collaborating on that or were working on it directly, and it seemed to indicate that implementing that in LLVM would be tough in terms of maintainability. And for the use case, it is a very particular use case that cryptographers and security people care about, as opposed to a general LLVM or Rust user. So that may not happen, unfortunately. But other great things out of Hacks, testing tools, verification tools, fuzzing for Rust, and this is not just stuff that's specific to cryptography in Rust, but any software that you would like to have high assurance guarantees about in Rust. But they are definitely things that we cryptographers or people writing cryptography in Rust really like. Things seem to be maturing well, which is nice.
In what ways do you see things maturing?
One, the tooling. It's not completely there yet. There's a lot of diversity in fuzz tooling, but better to have diversity than no options at all. So I think having that kind of coalesce into community standards will be good. A thing that just comes to mind that is not directly cryptography, but tooling and observability about async runtimes. It's kind of new to Rust, but it's also a big selling point to Rust. Being able to inspect a lot of the stuff that Rust lets you do that is very powerful, but could also bite your hand if you have to be careful about it. And to be fair, like, it's kind of like you get all these things in Rust that you don't get in other languages like C and C++, perhaps, but comparable languages like, say, Golang might provide to you. Those things are evolving but aren't quite there in Rust. yeah, that's kind of a vague POV for Rust in general that we talked about a little bit at Hacks. But I'm very excited. So either way.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Anyone else have any more points about Hacks?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, this is Rich Sauls.
Hey, hi. Great
Hi
to
there.
have you.
Good. So I just want to emphasize. So I've been an OpenSSL developer, program team member for a long time, and paying for my sins now. And I work for Akamai, and I just want to emphasize that the thing we like best about Rust crypto potentials is it's probably going to end up being, as fast as C and memory safe. And that's much more important to us than verification, which I mentioned at the Hacks conference. So I think, we don't have to wait for commercial adoption. It's going to be, if it works fast and it's not going to have stray pointers, that may be enough for many people, and including us, Akamai.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, Rich. Any more points before I get into a little bit more of a retrospective? Okay, we can always come back to that as well. Again, this is trying to be as much as possible a free-flowing conversation, and we will have points where we can double back on topics that we've already covered, and tread back on things that we need to go over again. What I wanted to do was ask, this is open to everyone now, but starting with Tony, if possible. Where have we come from with Rust? I'm going to do a little bit of a retrospective just to see where things, how far things have come. I wanted to ask for Tony's insights, and then again opening up to the rest of the group. Where did things begin to an extent? I mean, not like from straight inception, but just where did things begin, and how far have we come with Rust crypto? Before getting into the actual stuff that's needed, we just want to take a little step back and look behind us a little bit. Tony?
Yeah, sure. So I started using Rust in about 2014. So back then, pretty much everything started as wrappers for C libraries. So there's OpenSSL was like a popular one. There are wrappers for like the Apple foundation, what do you call that? The security services it provides, right? And wrappers for like S channel on Windows and that kind of thing. And then, so things kind of started that way. Everything was just wrappers for C. And I think what we've seen more and more of is people writing cryptography in pure Rust. And that started out with a lot of trepidation around things like, can we produce constant time code in Rust? Will there be side channels that, can be addressed somehow in assembly implementations or in C that can't be addressed in Rust? And I think what we found out is Rust is actually a pretty good language for cryptography. Most of the time, I'd say the compiler does what we want. I've run into a few miscompilation bugs using intrinsics, but overall, I think Rust is a great language for cryptography, and I've had a pretty good time doing pure Rust cryptography. So I think that's the exciting future for Rust here.
Amazing. Amazing. Anybody else want to share any milestones on their journey with cryptography with Rust over the past years? Like, where have we come from up until like version 1? Shady has his hand up. Their hand up. Sorry.
Yeah. I am using. I am not really like experienced with crypto stuff, but Rust, like, because of fearless using crypto, I am working actually on cryptocurrency field right now, but also for my side projects, I am building real-time chat application with end-to-end encryption. So I tried to build my own like encryption scheme similar to Signal one. And the big thing here is that all my Rust crypto libraries are written for specifically to be used on mobile phone. So I used to be expose FFI to mobile phone. I'm using Flutter and Rust at the same time. So yeah, actually using Rust with crypto was easier than I was expecting at first. Because I already like used Rust before for other things, but for crypto specific curve the curve cryptography was I actually like had no idea about them at first. But yeah, the overall experience was pleasing, especially for the DELIC working group. They are working really hard on a lot of crypto libraries.
And you know, that's a really great point you made there. And actually leads me, maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit with the next question, but I think you just really made a great point. Beginning with cryptography in Rust, how has that experience been for many people, and what needs to be done to make things even better across the board? I think that's one of the really key areas to really get things going. I will let Deirdre come in first with that, and then we'll go to Greg.
My first instinct is there is no crypto in the standard library. So there is no exposed crypto APIs in the standard library. So when a new Rust user comes in and they're like, I need a hash function, if they know what that is, or they need to just encrypt a blob or something like that, there's no obvious straight up answer. So the next step you might do is you go to crates.io and you start Googling for cryptography or whatever. And that's not necessarily going to give you, if you ask your, personal Rust cryptographer, like, what library should I use? They might give you a different answer than if you just went to crates.io or started Googling. There is a reason why a lot of people are still reaching for Ring, which is a Rust library that wraps C, but is replacing parts of it steadily with Rust over time. I'm not saying Ring is a good library, but ideally it would be written all in Rust. There's a reason people still reach for that, because it is kind of your toolbox. I think that is a thing that we need to address somehow. And the answer is not necessarily put Rust in the standard library, but the user story about where people get their Rust crypto libraries or Rust crypto that they use needs to be improved, because we want people to use the pure Rust implementations as much as possible so they get the maximum benefit of memory safety and all of that. But also we want them to use the best for your value system of best crypto library available to them as well. And it's hard for them to find that, in my opinion.
No, that's really important. Thank you so much. Greg, would you like to come in next?
She already made almost all the points I was going to make. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate that. My background is primarily Java and some amount of work also with OpenSSL, and I've been moving very heavily into Rust recently because I think it's the future of how we should write crypto code. But I do want to add another aspect to this, and that is that I really don't think that we should be focusing on a Rust crypto library, because I think that there are at least two very, very different audiences. There are the developers who need some sort of crypto, and ideally we should be pushing them towards much higher, much safer libraries to use. And then there are the developers, many of whom are in here, who need to be working at a lower level because they're implementing the primitives and the protocols. And that's a second group. And I think that one of the biggest issues that we see with the Java crypto APIs or with OpenSSL or with many of these others is they combine the two. You see ASGCM, or you even see TLS right next to ASECB and possibly right next to your elliptic curve math. And so I think that we need a simple place for developers to go and basically say, hey, for almost everyone, go here. Here's something that is nice and easy with few sharp edges. And if you're doing lower level crypto, here's our recommendation of the low level primitive implementations that you can use.
Great. Thank you so much for those points. So I can see you, Henry. I acknowledge your hand, but I have also seen Lucas and Drew. So I want to be as fair as possible. Let me allow Lucas to make their point, and then Henry, I will come back to you. Is that all right? Lucas.
Yeah, so just briefly, I'm a student at EPFL. I work on hardening implementations against timing attacks. So yeah, I think Greg sort of summarized a lot of what I was going to say. I think one important thing is to be able to provide like a one-stop shop for applications. So libsodium and ACL are kind of out of fashion, but it would be nice to sort of have a modernized version of that written in Rust that we could point application developers to and say, if you don't know what a password hash is, the library would teach you those kind of things. You don't need to know what an AE80 is to use the library, but that kind of level of abstraction would be nice. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Drew, I also acknowledge you as well. Please bear with me. Henry and then Drew. Henry?
So just to kind of branch off the point that Greg made, I actually would go even further than saying that there's like two groups of people, like, you know, crypto users and crypto developers. I think that there's this kind of like, you know, not like literally a fractal, but there is sort of this like multi-resolution nature to this, where as you zoom in, you can draw like finer and finer distinctions. And a lot of the time, even if you are like a crypto developer, typically you're not trying to build an entire like stack of constructions all at once. Like, oh, I want to instantiate a signature scheme, so I need to have like a group that I can use. Or like, oh, I'm trying to build this like higher level crypto protocol, and I need to like stick a signature scheme in here, right? Like there's a lot of different levels at which someone can simultaneously be like a crypto developer and a crypto user, depending sort of exactly what they're doing at that moment. And so I think that even to go sort of beyond this idea of having, you know, two levels of API, I think you should have as many levels of API as there are kind of like different concepts. And one thing that I think is really nice about Rust is that there's this sort of like library first culture where you typically would write your code so that it is useful as a library. And I think that we could potentially get to a place where there are a lot of different libraries that exist sort of at various different points on this sort of like gradient of abstraction, rather than trying to sort of say, well, here's the like, you know, library for crypto users, and here's the library for crypto developers, because this boundary isn't really stable. It changes over time, and a particular user may, you know, move down the stack as they're expanding what they're doing, or evolving their product or something. And you have new constructions that come in all the time. So I think trying to figure out how could you effectively convey to people, you know, if they land on the crate README or something, a set of expectations about like, you know, you should use this if you are trying to do X, Y, and Z. If you're trying to do something else, you might want to use like one of these higher level tools, or a lower level tool as appropriate.
No, absolutely. Those were some great points. I'm going to let Drew come in now and make their points. And again, please forgive me. We're going to get this question thing going as we iterate and as we incrementally do more of these sync up calls, and then it will start to flow a lot better. So Drew, thank you very much for your patience.
Hey everyone. I'm coming from mostly the blockchain side of the industry and definitely more of an application developer. But something that I think has improved tremendously over the last 6 months is sort of WebAssembly support or no standard support for a lot of these crypto libraries. And I'd definitely love to see more of that being embraced, especially as a lot of these applications come to the web. It becomes really helpful to have, the ability to reuse your code in the browser, as well as other environments that might use WebAssembly. So I know I've showed that in the past, maybe not in these public settings, but yeah, that's kind of what I'd like to say.
No, that's a really cool point. And I think, again, that's even brought another question to mind to follow on. What role do we feel WASM has in the Rust cryptography ecosystem as a whole? What sort of opportunities are there? Things that we haven't even thought of yet regarding, WASM being more a part of this ecosystem. And that's open to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for us.
Oh, sorry. Who wants to? Drew. I think Drew just got there. And
I was going to say for. Oops, sorry.
And sorry, that was Derek. So Derek, I'll allow you to come in after. Apologies for that. So go ahead, Drew.
For us, we're using it mostly to do even zero knowledge proof generation in the browser, but I could see going forward, I mean, maybe you can do interesting multi-party computation in the browser as people, depending on the protocols is sort of, I don't know, tremendous amount of applications yet for that context, but it seems like it would open up some interesting use cases.
Great. Well, that sounds really cool. Derek, thank you very much for being patient.
Oh, no problem. To give me a little bit of my background, I'm a research engineer at ARM Limited. So we tend to work on lower level stuff, but the project I'm working on is a confidential compute environment, and we're using WebAssembly inside trusted execution environments. Think about SGX or AMD SEV. And we're using the WebAssembly to sandbox user code. And we've had a few discussions internally about how we would use crypto there. If we were just doing it pure WebAssembly, it then becomes do the crypto in pure WebAssembly. It becomes pretty difficult to ensure any sort of constant time behavior in there. There is some WebAssembly CT work that's going on, but it's very dependent upon the runtime that you're going on. So what we're probably going to end up doing is just, stubbing it out to an API and then doing everything native instead of having our crypto run in WebAssembly, because it scares us in our environment to be doing that. So.
Wow, that sounds crazy. It's really cool to hear. Lucas.
Yeah, so I actually have a question about that. So what exactly causes the WASM to lose its constant time properties? Is it the fact that it gets jitted and then potentially transformed? Is that the concern?
Yeah, so we support both jitting and translation, depending on the environment that you're running in. And the constant time is highly dependent on who's doing that jit or who's doing that translation. And keeping those promises becomes On JIT, keeping those promises is probably fairly straightforward. In translation, keeping those promises is really hard. So.
And Drew, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come back in?
My bad.
No worries. Okay. That all sounds really, really like mind-blowing. Moving on a little bit now. I think one question that I have from my point of view, being completely outside of cryptography and Rust, and just being here as someone to observe and facilitate, like what other areas of cryptography should we explore? But I think I just saw Diego's hand. Diego, did you want to come in with something before I get into this next question?
Yeah, so on this previous question on what could the interest group do, maybe this is a silly suggestion, but as a sort of newcomer, I also get very confused about what crates to use for specific purposes. Cross dependencies, right? Sometimes you have a crate that uses one RNG implementation and you want to interop with some other crate that uses something else. So is there a crate curation effort? Is this something proper? Is this something that happens on the Rust ecosystem, that interest groups kind of select groups of crates that make sense and work well together and so on?
And that's open to everyone. Could be something that we could even table.
So I have a suggestion for that. Kind of elsewhere in the ecosystem, there are just like lists, like awesome.
Yeah,
Rust.
I was thinking of that. Yeah.
So I think one of the things this group could do is put together like an awesome Rust cryptography list and just be comprehensive and be like, here are, you know, the best cryptography crates in the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be one of the big challenges when we move forward, because this is great as a talking for and everything else, but like when we actually have to get down to doing stuff, that's when we're really going to see some of the interesting challenges. So I have, again, my role here is just to facilitate this, is just to be like almost the admin person and just get out of the way and allow you folks to talk and build and generate all these amazing ideas. We do have a coordination repo, coordination GitHub repo, which people can observe and contribute ideas to. I'm going to share that after this. And all that will require of you is your GitHub handle so that I can invite you into that coordination repo. I was also speaking with Nico Matsakis from AWS, Rust AWS, and I mean everyone knows Nico. And he was actually going to be here today, and I was going to actually ask him about floating the idea of a Rust cryptography vision doc in a similar vein to what he did with the async vision docs as well. And we had that discussion, and he was like, you know what, again, if that is of value, it would be great to have some of his insights to walk through the process of creating the vision doc, which might help bring out a lot of things that are needed. Before I jump to the other question that I was asking initially, how does that sound to people, having a Rust cryptography vision doc process in the same way that the async ecosystem did? And that's open to everyone. Lucas?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, just a small question. Are vision docs related to the ecosystem or just to the language?
From my understanding, they're related to the ecosystem.
Okay, yeah. So
and,
then
and
that's
a specific domain within the ecosystem.
Okay, yeah. So, but my question was going to be what language features are, to the extent the language seems to be less of a component than the ecosystem, but if the ecosystem is a part of it, then that's not a concern, because.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it should definitely be ecosystem focused. I know one of the reasons why we wanted to create a interest group for cryptography instead of a working group is, you know, aside from these very specific issues of like constant time and LLVM and that kind of thing, right? There aren't really like language level deliverables, I think, related to cryptography in the same way there are for like async and that kind of thing. Or at least if there should be, I think we're probably a long ways away from that. So yeah, I think like the focus is just primarily on the ecosystem, having good libraries, having good crates, not necessarily like trying to make language changes unless they're very, very specific to like specific problems.
Great. Deirdre?
Agreed. I'm mostly ecosystem focused. One thing that I don't have an obvious or a straight opinion on is common traits that we can use to interoperate. So for example, there's a hash type as part of the standard library for Rust that is different than other hash types for cryptography. Not exactly different, but possibly different enough. There have been common traits that several of us have been using, such as groups or prime order groups or things like that, that we've been trying to sort of get interoperable implementations of traits so that we can have interoperable implementations of cryptography. Probably doesn't need to be in the standard library of Rust to have everyone have like groups and all that sort of stuff available, but we should probably try, maybe as part of the vision doc, see if we want to pursue like, here are some common traits that people can interoperate against, or maybe that's not important for interoperable groups or types of hashes or signatures or things like that. That might be something a vision doc could address.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much for that. Jack, great to have you. Oh, hello. Yes, okay, you know.
There we go. Hi, Jack or Strad. I answer to both. I'm from Electrical Company, Zcash Stuff Blockchain. I'm one of the maintainers of the ZK Crypto stacker crates, FF and group and so on. And
the legends.
The zero knowledge cryptography related cryptography mostly. But +1 on, Deirdre and Tony mostly stole what I was going to say. Like I wanted to make just a note of like something I quite like, sort of to contrast this to say what the Go standard library does, where they have they do have a, not necessarily in the standard library, but their X crypto package basically is the blessed standard thing. And they're reasonably, or at least have been becoming more reasonably careful in the way in which they curate that that surface. And I remember they actually put together a sort of like a little bit of a vision, sort of like, I don't know if this is quite what we would want as a vision document, but they had like how they see their things evolving to the point of like, it was like, stability, then speed, then stability, usability, performance, and then compatibility or something like that, in terms of like what they felt were their preferences for how they approached different areas of that stack. I think something like thinking about how we want to approach that, and I know like we mentioned, I saw in the chat, lists were mentioned earlier in terms of how we find things. Maybe we're at an earlier enough point that we're not going to be like directly recommending things, but I think we're going to at least want to recommend or start thinking about recommending directions that we guide people in for the kinds of, getting back to that levels thing, the kinds of things we want to get into, because as much as we can say, here's a list, like it's not a normative reference, people are going to end up interpreting it as a normative reference and potentially shooting themselves in the foot. So I think something we need to at least think about is like, you know, the responsibility that we will have as someone trying to create something like this in terms of, you know, what guarantees we are actually providing, what guarantees we would like to eventually be able to provide in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those points. And I think it was a really good point you made about blessed lists. I remember Tony and Diego, when we had one of the planning calls for this event, made some really good points about the need for a blessed list in Rust crypto in a similar vein to what Golang have. And those are some very interesting points that you made up. I don't know if Tony wants to kind of share those points about, you know, the differences between Go being kind of under diktat from Google to an extent. So that's why they have those blessed lists. And maybe we can kind of pull that thread a little bit more.
I mean, I can just say something really quick about that. Basically, I just think that like Go is a really good story for this sort of thing, and right now Rust is a little more you know, confused in this regard, right? Like if a Go developer needs to reach for one of these cryptographic primitives, like there are a bunch in the standard library, or as people are saying in the chat, like this X crypto package. And I don't think there's quite as clear of a story for that in Rust right now. And that's one of the things I'd like to help solve, I think.
Great. No, that's really cool. That's really cool. Diego, if you had any points, if not, I'll just move on to like one of the final points I wanted to make.
Henry wants to make a comment.
Harry, yes, please.
Just very briefly, since we're kind of getting to the end, one thing that I think it's good to be realistic about when talking about trying to make common interface traits is that actually designing actually good traits is I think like at least like 10x harder than making a good implementation, because you have to figure out what are the like actually core behaviors that are required and what are the inessential implementation details, and how do we design this interface so that you can have the kind of like maximal flexibility in implementation, but like, you know, capturing precisely the right abstractions. And if you start with just like one implementation and then take what it does and make some traits for what its behavior are, there's a real risk that you end up basically baking in some assumptions that were just kind of like made by that implementation into this like common interface that everyone has to live with. And so I think that it's good to try to work on traits, but we should be, you know, cognizant of the amount of effort to get it really right.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Okay, and I'm looking at the time now, and time has flown. Like, I can't believe we're almost coming up to the hour. There were some other points that I wanted to make, but I think it might actually work for the energy in the room and the amount of time that we spent to maybe park those for the next one. If there's anything really important that anyone wants to share about anything that we've covered this call, please feel free to raise your hand now. Is there anything that anyone really has to share or wants to share?
Yeah, you might be just about to cover this, but maybe just some like next steps here of
Yes.
like especially like setting up more like async communication.
Yes.
Like there was a ton of interest on this call. There are probably over 100 people, I think, who
Yeah.
were interested, and a lot of you couldn't join because the list filled up. So it's like, I think it'd be great to continue these conversations, and we just need to figure out where and how to sort of do that. So I know Ernest had set up a coordination repo.
Yes.
So maybe we could open some issues about like chat, possibly a mailing list or forums or something like that, and have people like chime in there about how they'd like to kind of continue the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the big challenge. There's, you know, so many things to look into. There's so many things to explore. There's even so many things that we haven't really dug deep in on and gotten really into the depths of. But I think we just take it one step at a time, inch forward, and continue the discourse, continue the conversation. There are a number of places where these conversations are happening: the Zulit, the Discord server, Rust Discord server, and of course Twitter as well. What I wanted to say is this call and these types of calls, we're going to try and keep the momentum going with them as much as possible. I'm thinking, I mean, we discussed this monthly versus quarterly, and just again, I'm thinking for myself in terms of energy and everything going on, the quarterly would work best, but maybe monthly could work as well. It would be great to see if there was some appetite, what appetite there is for these types of calls continuing. So if anyone has any kind of thoughts on whether this should be monthly or quarterly, I'd love to hear them. And then we can kind of see where we go from there. Hi, Deirdre.
Possibly monthly to start, and then if we kind of get into a groove, we can move it to quarterly. Especially because it's like, okay, there is a repo. Okay, what next? I would say until we get into an async workflow of like what we're doing and where we're doing it when we're not on a call, I would do a monthly meeting.
Okay, cool. Well, you're gonna have to come on board and help out then, bro. Okay, so we're gonna go with monthly meetings for now, and then see how that progresses forward. Right. If I could ask for everyone who's on the call to DM at DevX Initiative, your GitHub handle, and then you'll be invited to the organization DevX, which will have the coordination repo in it. I'll just share the coordination repo as well. Okay, again, me, Diego, and Tony talked about the governance of that repo, and that's something that I would want to have a conversation about early on, so that that's out of the way and that doesn't become any kind of a drama down the line. So any ideas you have on the governance of that repo, so that again there isn't any like whatever down the line, that would be also great to hear your ideas. If you just DM the @DevX Initiative, that's literally just me answering that. So I'll be very happy to hear that, and I'm always open to input for the governance of these calls. Again, I'm only here to be the person to facilitate this and then get out of the way to allow the conversation to flow. So if there are any ideas on how we can improve this, please let me know. Thank you all so much for your patience with this, and you know, the nerves and the first time doing this and some of the awkwardness, but it's been really, really positive. It's been a really good vibes all around, and looking forward to the next one. So we're going to keep things consistent, and we'll aim to make the next one same time next month. So you'll be looking at the 20th of June, and then we will, I will actually put the handle, the Twitter handle in the chat. That's a great point. Bear with me, let me just grab that. Right. So here is the Twitter handle. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all and many more of you next month. Again, if you already kind of connect with each other through different on different platforms, please continue the discourse. Please continue following up on things that were discussed. This call has been recorded. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And this will be uploaded to a YouTube channel as an archive. So that even works as going back on certain points that were missed so that we can note them down. And I'm also thinking about a Kanban as well, just having a Kanban to extract all the points that were said on this call and turning them into like little mini stories or tasks for a Kanban where people can pick up and figure out where they can work together. So again, thank you all very much for coming. And this is really exciting. This is really nerve-wracking for me, but thank you all for being super gracious and super cool. And we'll catch up next month. Tony, Diego, do you want to say anything? Last words? Famous last words?
Yeah, I'm gonna drop a link in the chat here. So just to open an issue to a little tracking issue, but just an issue to discuss like further communication channels. Like I think it'd be cool to possibly set up either a Discord or a Zulip or something like specific to this with like topics broken out, like zero knowledge proofs or post-quantum cryptography, like trait design.
Yes, we didn't even get to that. We didn't even get to that. I think that'll be for the next call, post-quantum. Yeah, that'd be a cool thing to tackle. Great. Okay, and again, thank you all for just being super cool and just actually talking and having a discussion and answering and, you know, contributing. Diego, any last words?
I'll just throw in my little bit of Danish. So tack for a day, which means
okay,
for your time and effort. Yep.
Cool. No worries, no worries, no worries. And great. We will see you all and many more of you next month. All right. So take care, everyone. Please feel free to continue talking wherever you know each other, and we'll see you next month. Take care, everyone. Bye.
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 Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.